Well, hey friends, welcome back to my garden. I, let me tell you, I've spent the last 6 hours pruning a client's roses, and it was like the mood lifter I didn't know I needed. There is something so wonderful about pruning roses, and if you've never pruned a rose, welcome. I'm so excited you're here. But if you have, you kind of know, like for me, it's one of those deeply satisfying moments that just like, I don't know, it like puts my brain right. So we're gonna do some pruning today. Let's go over equipment. First and foremost, I have my Felcos. Now, these, you guys, are my Felco 14s. And I love them. I love them so much. I do not have very big hands, and my 14s, like, oof, they fit like absolute perfection. The other thing I have, more accoutrement, is we have these two things. Now, because I'm in and out of clients' gardens, and because black spot is such an issue up here as well as disease, I am always equipped to sanitize my pruners on the go. You're gonna see me do it. It's gonna be super duper quick, but basically I have some isopropyl alcohol in a spray bottle. This is 91%. Basically, I just spray down both sides of my pruning shears, and then I keep a roll of these blue paper towels, and I just wipe them off just because I don't want the alcohol like dripping everywhere. I'm sure I probably don't need to. It doesn't harm the plant. It's just more a sanitizing solution. I know other people who dip their shears into a bleach solution, but when I'm on the go in a garden, this is much easier to like hook onto the side of a bucket than like a little bottle or a little jar of watered down bleach solution. Last thing I'm going to be using today is I'm going to be using some rose fertilizer. Let me show you what I have. I'm just using what is in my current stash. So currently I have this EB Stone Organic Rose Fertilizer in my stash. Because it's what I have, I'm going to use it all up. However, I've also had really great results using Rose Tone. Both of those for me tend to work really, really well in my Pacific Northwest garden. For those of you who are unfamiliar, I'm gardening in zone 8B. Actually, technically we're now in zone 9, but I think that's insane. I think it's crazy. I can't wrap my head around it yet. I typically like to garden like I'm actually in a zone 7 because every couple years we get a really hard freeze and then it just trashes all of my tender zone 8, zone 9 plants. So what's really funny is this supply list I feel like keeps going on and on, but these are my new gloves. I was at Costco as per usual, and these are the Hydrangea. Now, I typically like the thinner, like almost like a neoprene style glove when I'm working in the garden. But when I'm doing roses, I need something more substantial. This one just has leather on the interior. It is super duper soft. So a rose still can get you through this fabric, but I pruned roses for 6 hours today, and I only got stabbed one time. And it was literally through this like tiny hole here, right kind of where my thumb meets the rest of my hand. So in any event, I really, really like these gloves, and I use a size small, and I do feel like the finger length on this is incredibly generous. So while I'm pruning today, I'm gonna walk you through the different roses I have in my garden. I have 4 in my dining room border behind me, and then I am trialing 1 in a container because I was chatting with Heirloom Roses, and they had a shrub rose that was well suited to growing in a container because if you've never grown roses in a container, not all of them like it. In fact, some of them freak out on you and hate it. But this one is reported to be excellent in a container, and it's been super happy all winter. If you are new here, this coat is very familiar. If you are not new here, welcome to my beloved coat. I have worn this for many, many gardening seasons. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. I always think it's kind of cool when I like fully wear through an item. But this sucker has become riddled with holes. I've ripped multiple holes in it, but I want to show you. My dear Brian has tracked down at, where was it? McClendon's? Okay, he was at McClendon. Wait, did you know to go there? Did you research it? How did you figure it out? Okay, so Brian was looking for like an olive green duct tape to hide this like wood portion at the show because a lot of the stuff at the Northwest Lawn Garden Festival is smoke and mirrors. That's just what it is. And so anyway, so he went to McClendon Hardware because they had like an olive green duct tape. What's amazing is look, it matches my coat perfectly. Also, this is like insanely expensive duct tape. He said it was like $16 or $17, but I will show you, I am currently donning a variety of patches, but we're just gonna wear this coat into the ground because I don't need to be glamorous in the garden, although it might be kind of fun. So I'm going to start right here. This is a David Austin rose called the Lady Gardener, and I love this one. The trick here, though, is she gets black spot like nobody's business. So we still have some diseased leaves left over from last year. That's why I'm pretty fastidious about raking this bed. And when you are pruning a rose, you want to look for anything that's diseased, anything that's dead, damaged, all of that. You're also looking for anything that's crossing. So you don't want two branches that are crossing in a little X and rubbing on each other. And then you're also pruning for shape. So whenever I prune my roses, I like a nice strong V shape. And you can see like right here, I can stick my hand right down the middle of this rose. That's what I want to see. This actually has a pretty decent shape left over from last year. A lot of these roses were living in containers at my old house. They didn't perform well. And so I've been rehabbing these the last couple of years, getting them situated in their new home. So I'm gonna go ahead and start in making some cuts. And every season I decide to do something a little bit different, but you're gonna just buckle up and watch me go. Okay, I'm gonna get really low here. A couple things before I begin. Ooh, I have, number one, already sanitized my little snips here. Second, I really have to be careful where I step because I have all sorts of awesome bulbs and all sorts of perennials coming up in this garden bed. So I'm just gonna have to be super duper careful. Last thing, when we are making a cut, you're wanting to cut above a growth point, right? So there's gonna be like a little knobby bit, and you can see this one, we've gotten some warm weather and this growth point is already pushing. There's actually a growth point on this back side here. I always want to encourage that vase shape or that chalice shape where you have a little bit of openness in the middle and everything else is kind of forming its branches outward. So for example, right here, I'm going to make a cut right here. Oh, and by the way, when I'm snipping these guys, I actually try to take my roses down by half. I like to take them down to about somewhere between knee and hip, just depending on the size of the rose. I prefer knee to mid-thigh, but sometimes you just have a giant rose on your hand, unless it's a climbing rose. That's a whole different video. But you're gonna cut right above a growth point because you wanna encourage that outward branching. So I wouldn't cut above this one, for example, because it's gonna send a cane right back into the middle of my rose, which I'm trying to leave clear. In contrast, this one is going to send a little growth right out here, which I mean, it may intersect with this guy, but chances are pretty good they'll miss each other, and I think that's a good spot for me to start. Coming back here, I'm actually going to break my rule, and I'm going to cut above this growth point right here. The reason being is we are right up against this taxus hedge, and I know that if I make a clipping on a node that's going to head back into the hedge, I'm not going to be able to access that rose. So I think I'm going to set to work. I'm going to set up this camera, and you're going to watch me go to town. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I'm going to try to get to as many as possible. And if this is your first time pruning a rose, congratulations. Welcome to the wild world of rose pruning. Okay, let's do it. Okay, a couple little tidbits here as you're pruning roses. I want you to also occasionally get your head out of the rose, because if you are too far into this thing, you can lose your way on your cuts. So what I like to do is I like to stand back, kind of eyeball my work, and then dive in. If you have a rose that you really need to do, say like a rejuvenation prune on, like you really need to get after it because it's been neglected a couple years, kind of take everything down to a consistent height. So say you've got like a 4-foot tall rose, bring it down to like say 2.5, 3 feet. Then once that top canopy is gone, then dive in and establish the new shape that you're going for, keeping in mind that V with that open center. Now, this is kind of my last little thing. I've stood back, I've looked at my shape here. This isn't bad. If I wanted to go for broke, I actually probably could come back here and make a cut at this point as well. That'll probably send one growing here, which I'm not too mad about. But I think I'm just gonna go ahead and leave it as is for now with a little bit of height in the middle. This is looking pretty darn good. The one thing I don't like is that little guy. There's a little bit of funky growth going on there. Okay, I think this is gonna do it for the lady gardener. I'm gonna sanitize my snips and then head to the next rose. So this is a newer rose to me. This one is honey Dijon, and you guys, I sometimes get plant amnesia over what I have in my garden because I dug out the plant tag and I was like, ooh, yes, I love this one. But anyways, we're gonna attack it in the same method. I've got a little bit of like a funky branch situation here in the middle, so I might actually take off this whole darn thing. But we're just gonna jump in and see where the wind blows us. I'm kind of not liking this one, actually. This cane looks super funky. And okay, I'm actually going to take this out because I've got 2 canes rubbing. I've got this one and then this one's that's headed back. So I'm actually going to take out that guy. All right, this one I'm going to cut down here. And this guy here. And you know what I might do? I'm actually going to cut this guy here, right above this node here, because it's hopefully going to encourage it out in this direction. And this little guy, I'm actually not digging on that formation. Ooh. So we went real aggressive here, but she's gonna be fine. Okay, so the reason I took this one out is, do you see how like I just have so many different angles here from like, maybe I was pruning mid-season for an arrangement, but for whatever reason, we're just kind of looking a little funky here, and I didn't like this black right here and this splitting that's going on in this cane. So anyways, I just took this one out. I'm also not really digging on the appearance. I don't think it's bad, but I haven't noticed anything funny going on with this honey Dijon. So and also everything here looks fine. I didn't like how that was looking, and it just was like too many awkward cuts. So that's why I made the decision to eliminate this guy. Okay, this one is Celestial Night, another really, really good one. And this one is performing like crazy. She's so vigorous. And so this one, probably all I'm gonna do is just a teeny tiny bit of cleanup, because it actually looks in like really good shape. And so there isn't much that I need to do. I do want to take it down a little bit in height. And all of these cuts are just so clear to me after having done this for so many years. But she is looking really, really good. To see if I would make any. This is kind of the one area. Do you see these 2 guys? This is the one area where I'm like, sometimes I'll bend a cane back and be like, okay, what do we think about that? Or I'll take this guy out. You know what? I actually think I like that better. Okay, so I'm gonna make the decision to remove this one. And this is a really hard choice because it's a super healthy cane, but I don't want to end up in a situation where it's rubbing on its neighbor. And I always want to have that same thing where I can like reach down in the middle of the rose. And actually I'm going to remove this one, because now I can totally do that. You know, this is the other one that I thought I might actually remove this one because that one is kind of the same deal. I am going to take off this guy. One thing I didn't mention is if I have like a really thin kind of whipcord of a cane or a branch, whatever you want to call it, I will remove that as well because I just don't feel the need to keep something that's very spindly on hand. Now I'm actually thinking I might take this one out too, which I know is kind of crazy, but I go pretty hard on my roses. I mean, it has some nice good green growth, but I just felt like we were so congested in here. I'm actually going to take off this one as well because I don't want anything heading back in. And then actually I'm going to cut everything, I think, to there. Okay, and coming back here, I'll cut that one. And that one is dead. And this, I think, already has kind of a nice shape. I've got some outward growth there. And that one, I don't want this one growing into the middle, so that's why I'm taking that little guy off. Okay, I think this will do for now. I'm going to sanitize and we're going to get on to the next. Okay, this last one in my border is Jude the Obscure, and this is a fabulous rose. It is so lovely, but this one also really struggles with black spot. So I've already sanitized my snips. We're about ready to go in. And one thing I didn't mention, because it didn't need to be done on the others, is that when you are pruning your roses, if there's any foliage left from the previous year, strip it off and rake it out. So I'm going to start in the back here and I'm going to cut above that node, which will push a branch kind of out in this direction. I don't want it headed back into the taxus. So we'll start there. I'm noticing something I don't like, which is like a big old hole here. So, and it feels very heavy on this side. So I'm gonna roll the dice. I'm gonna cut it here. Here's why. I see a node right here that will shoot out a branch in this direction. And so I'm gonna roll the dice and hope, pray, magic fairy dust, that this thing comes out in this direction to create a little bit more balance here for this rose. And then I think last thing I'm gonna do is come over here, because this rose she's just looking a little bit funky over here. All right, perfect. Okay, there you have it. And now I'm gonna go through, clean up these leaves, and then put a little rose fertilizer around each one. Okay, by the way, when I am fertilizing, I am actually kind of a bit of a lazy gardener, a bit of a haphazard gardener, if you will. I basically, from these little roses, I'm just gonna take a small handful. I don't go overboard. I do fertilize my roses throughout the growing season, but when I get them off to a good start, it is literally just a handful. And since I'm using kind of a little bit of a granular situation, you just work it into your mulch and off to the next. Okay, so this next rose is a new one. This is called Spiced Coffee, and I actually just planted this one in the fall. And so really because it's a fall planted rose, it really hasn't had much of a chance to put on any sort of size at all. So this is going to be its first growing season. We have survived the bulk of winter, and so all I'm going to do with this little guy is I'm probably just going to take off like any wayward growth. I had some buds that it tried to push right before winter super fully set in. So I'll take off some of those and anything that's dead. So for example, this right here, you can see that clipping is brown. That is how you know it's actually dead. If it's green, she's alive. So you're not going to see me do anything spectacular here with this rose because it's literally just a baby. This is like its first time out the gate. And so the only thing I'm doing is taking off anything dead. And if I see anything glaringly obvious, which I kind of don't, but I am kind of seeing some cool new shoots come up. So I think I'm just going to let this guy ride and see what happens. I'm actually going to take off my gloves for this. This one actually has started pushing some new green growth. So anything that is last year's foliage, I'm just going to come in here and delicately remove. I usually remove my previous year's foliage with wild abandon. I usually just yank them off. But because this is a new little baby and everything is still kind of little and tender, I'm going to just use my little snips here if they don't break off easily. You kind of can tell it's last year's growth because of the color difference. So like right here, all of this new growth has a little bit of like a red edge to it. In fact, this one, I'll take it off just to show you, this one still has a red edge to it. So right there, this is that new baby growth. It's usually a little bit of a different color. Sometimes it's like this purpley red. But this growth, because it's still new, I kind of didn't make it out here in time. Typically, I wouldn't have, these would be naked as a jaybird when I'm done with them. However, I'm gonna leave a little bit of this because it is this year's new growth and I don't wanna clip off any buds. Friends, it is hydrangea time and welcome to my little limelight row. These are limelight hydrangeas. They are a classic. I use them all the time. I love them. They are a gorgeous paniculata hydrangea, and so we're going to walk through paniculata hydrangea pruning. It is super duper easy. I like to leave my blooms on over the winter because if I prune them in the fall, I open it up to disease, damage from the cold, what have you. I also think that this makes excellent winter interest because otherwise I'm just staring at a bunch of sticks in front of the house, and so I like to leave the blooms. Now, when you're pruning a hydrangea paniculata, I know a lot of people who take this bad ride all the way to the ground. And can you do that? Yes, you can. But do I like to do that? No, because it leads to a lot of flopping, which is a common question that I get asked by friends and clients and all that. So what I like to do is I like to do the 1, 2, 3 snip method. It is very, very easy. Essentially, when you are pruning your hydrangea, and they always come in these little pairs, right? I basically come down to the base and I'm looking for my leaf nodes. That's where like the little knobbly bits are that are going to push out new growth. I come down to the base and I go 1, 2, 3. And at that point, I make my cut. So 1, 2, 3, snip, off she goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and the first thing I do is I get rid of all of the blossoms from the previous year using that like 1, 2, 3 snip method. Then once I have a better bird's eye view, I then dive back in and I'm looking for branches that are crossing. I'm looking for spindly little whippy things that aren't going to really hold up a substantial bloom. And then I stand back to make sure that I've got some nice evenness going down my row. Okay, so those are the rules of the game. Let's get after it. You're gonna see right here, occasionally you'll have a hydrangea blossom that has broken off. I basically handle it the same way. I go back to wherever it branched off from this main little trunk here. 1, 2, 3, and then I give it a snip. And like this one, both of these got busted off because we were in here messing with the siding. So I just need to make sure I go back for consistency and shape. And I think that got all of them. So I'm gonna continue down my row and then I'll dive back in and do a little quality check to make sure I don't have any spindly bits or things that are rubbing on each other or crossing. Okay friends, this is classic spring in Seattle and also trying to be a content creator. It's literally, I've worked a full day, kids are all getting home from school, and also I'm trying to beat out the rain. So you guys are gonna get a slightly rain on Kate. Friends, so we are super up close here on this hydrangea, but I wanted to take you in to show you a couple things. First and foremost, let's see if we can get this little guy right here. I'm actually, see this one? This little guy is cutting straight back into the middle, so I'm actually going to chase it down right here, and I'm actually just going to snip it off at its base and remove it. The other thing that I look for here, and these are so spindly, so they're going to be hard to see, but things like this little guy, that little whip, do you see how tiny that thing is? That won't be able to hold up a hill of beans. So this guy is going. I've got a couple more down here. That little guy also not holding up anything. This guy here also not holding up anything. See if there's any others that I want to show you. Oh yeah, okay. I also want to show you this whole thing right here. I'm looking at the coloring of this wood, and that is actually dead. Do you see how this is brown? Now, a really interesting way to do this is you can actually take your little pruners here, and normally, see how I just scratched away the surface? Normally, if I did that, that would be green. Let's come down here a little bit further. Okay, do you see how that is super green? I know that kind of just from experience, this top part is dead. And so I'm actually gonna clip it way back to right above where that green begins and see if it produces some lateral shoots. Okay, this is the last thing that I wanted to show you. I get a lot of questions regarding timelines, dates, all of that. And I want to propose a new line of thinking. My proposition is that we listen to our plants and we watch for signs that they are indeed ready. Do you see these little growth points here? When you start to see these pushing and they become, we can even come up here, they're like just a little bit of a green nubby coming out there. That's how you know it's time to prune your paniculata hydrangea. So we're going to look for the hydrangea to tell us. Now in my region, I can do this as early as late February. Here we are a couple weeks into March, and it is a perfectly wonderful time to do that as well. I think of all pruning as being a window, not a hard and fast date. Okay, friends, the rain is really picking up, so I'm gonna head back inside so the camera and myself aren't completely drenched, but I hope you've learned something. If nothing else, I hope it was kind of relaxing to see another area of the garden tidied and ready for the spring. I'll see you in the next one. In the meantime, say hello to your garden for me.